on the Codex team, the desktop app, for example, really started from a place of like, this is not an IDE, right? I think like it started from a philosophy of like, we are not trying to build a better IDE, right?
Yeah.
We're building something completely different. We're building like a product that helps you manage agents to do real work. I think we are in the middle of that same transition with AI. And I think the Google.com of AI is take this product and like cram a chat box on the sidebar, right? And then like chat with it on the side while you're doing stuff in the app.
Hey, Luca here. Welcome to a new episode of the Refactoring Podcast, where every 2 weeks we interview a world-class tech leader. Today's guest is Charlie Guo, developer experience engineer at OpenAI. With Charlie, we explore the evolution of AI coding tools, how this is affecting team organization, and the future of AI integration in software development. Charlie shared strategies and tricks to leverage AI effectively and how this is all transforming the workflows that we all know and love. So let's dive right into the action. Welcome, Charlie, and thank you so much for being here with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So, Charlie, you work on developer experience at OpenAI. You're a fellow newsletter writer, just like me, and you're also a former founder and CTO. And I'm excited to have this chat with you today because I have to say, for AI coding, I've been using Codex almost exclusively over the past 2 months or so. And my feeling is that Codex as an app, first and foremost, even before we take into account models, has improved immensely in recent times. And I find myself using it for more and more stuff, even non-coding stuff. So I love that you are here today. So I will try to make you spill the beans and the secret sauce about how you make it. Is that okay for you?
Yeah, I would love to share as much as I can. Hopefully, I don't get in trouble for any of this. Knock on wood. But let's do it.
Yeah, let's not remember this as the very last interview of Charlie. So first of all, I want to ask, as a fellow engineer and former CTO, what does the Codex team look like? Like, how many people? What roles? How they work? I mean, a day in the life of the Codex team.
Yeah, I think like in terms of how many people, that's a great question. It's constantly growing, so I actually don't know if I know the correct number, but it is certainly like dozens of people, and it is remarkably flat as a team, right? I think there's like for such a product that has so much craft and polish in it, and there are like so many people contributing, to its success. You might think that it'd be a lot of levels of managers and organization, but it's remarkably flat. And I think, that stems from a lot of really great people, a lot of really smart people working on the application. And I think just a lot of trust. I think this is true within OpenAI in general, just like a lot of trust that, you are going to figure out like what the correct decision is. And like, if you need help, you will ask for help, but like, you don't need to be micromanaged in your work.
Hey, before we continue, I want to tell you more about the sponsor of this podcast season, which is Notion. If you've been reading Refactoring for a while, you know that I'm a big fan of Notion. I've used it for many years, and I've been in touch with the team for a long time. We've compared notes about knowledge management, agents, and more. So speaking of agents, with custom agents which came out earlier this year, Notion became a collaborative AI workspace where teams and agents can work side by side. And I love that now they have revamped their entire developer platform to turn that workspace into actual infrastructure that developers can build on. And the new developer platform introduces 3 new capabilities. First of all, you can sync any data source into Notion, continuously upserting data from tools like Linear or Salesforce or Jira into a Notion database. Second, you can build any tool for your agent, so it can generate assets, query live data, or hit your internal APIs. And finally, you can orchestrate any agent in Notion. You can pick your favorite one, including Code, Codex, or the one you built yourself. You chat with them, assign them work, and track their progress right inside the same collaborative workspace where your team already works. So put it all together, Notion becomes an orchestration layer where data, tools, agents, and teams work together. Learn more about Notion's developer platform today at ntn.so/refactoring. Yeah, and the team being flat is something that we hear quite often when we speak with elite product teams that are building great products. And I wonder, what do you think is it that enables the team being flat? Right? Is it about putting together people with well-defined set of skills? Maybe they're all like generalists and product builders, or it's about workflows, it's about using AI well. What is it that you're getting right with respect to this way of organizing work that other teams are unable to?
That's a great question. I'm trying to think like, um, I'm sure if you ask different people on the team, they'll give you different answers. I think in my case, it would be making sure that you communicate the important things well, and that you
Mm,
have, you can call them workflows, you can call them process, but like you have ways to reliably enforce those values, right, and those
mm,
goals. Kind of, it's kind of funny. I think a lot of those same patterns then apply to using AI as a coding tool, right? I think like
yeah,
we humans do it maybe over Slack messages and meetings, right? But like as we are moving into an era where you're managing multiple agents at the same time, I think you do need those same types of, either rituals, or probably in the case of agents, they're stricter,
yeah,
right? That might look like you have a custom linter, right? Or that might look like
yeah,
you have architectural decision records so that,
yeah,
the agent understands the context of all the decisions that got made before it. On the
yeah,
human side, I think it's more about like, you have meetings to keep everybody in sync. You have like very
yeah,
clear, here's the roadmap, or here are the like product philosophies, right, that we really believe in. Um,
mm,
I think like on the Codex team, uh, the desktop app, for example, really started from a place of like, this is not an IDE, right? I think like it
mm,
started from a philosophy of like, we are not trying to build a better IDE, right? We are
yeah.
building something completely different. We are building like a product that helps you manage agents to do real work.
Yeah,
And I think like
where
everybody,
if I can
yeah,
stop you for a moment, where when you say let's not build an IDE, the thing that I'm getting, and you tell me if I'm right, is let's not build an like a glorified text editor, right? I mean, the text is not, the code is not the focus of this thing, because we are assuming the AI is doing the heavy lifting here.
yeah. I think we saw as an industry, right? We saw the evolution of coding and AI. First, it was, I think in the earliest days, it was GitHub Copilot, right? Actually, even
Yeah,
before that, it was Codex, right? It was the OpenAI model. OpenAI has had like 10 different things named Codex at this point. The
yeah,
very first one, people might not know this. The very first one was a model that could like GPT-3. It could autocomplete code snippets.
yeah,
And that became GitHub Copilot. And then after that, the next era was like Cursor, right? And like
yeah,
IDEs that it was a text editor, but you could integrate AI natively into it. Um, and I think we looked at a lot of those, not me, I wasn't on the team at the time, but like the team looked at a lot of those products and said, these are great for what they do, but what is that next phase, right? And I think that
yeah.
next phase is like you said, moving out of the text editor as the primary surface.
Yeah, and I think the first instance of us moving out of the text editor has been the first wave of CLI tools, right? It became unexpectedly popular, probably, if you think that we've been working with IDEs for like decades, right? And now it feels to me that we are kind of going back to full-fledged apps to like Codex itself and others to manage and orchestrate agents and work. So do you think that the CLI version of these tools and models and these native desktop apps are like one transition from one thing to the other, or they kind of live together for different use cases? What do you see from your like vantage point?
Um, I I understand why the CLI is really attractive for developers, right? Like I say this as a developer. Um, I think there was also though this challenge for me that I always had with the CLI where um, I had a hard time letting go of the text editor, right?
Yeah,
Because it's for two reasons, right? One, I think when you think about the CLI as a product surface, there's certain affordances that are very difficult to do in the CLI, right? It is very
yeah,
difficult to like review a like 300 line diff in the
yeah,
CLI, right?
yeah,
But I think there were also at the time like model limitations that made it difficult to let go of the editor. I think up until probably December, right? And a lot of people have talked about this like step change. I think around December when we had,
yeah,
I think it was Opus 4.6 and like
yeah,
GPT 5.3 Codex 5.4. Before those models, for me, it was really hard to trust, to have a lot of trust in what they were
yeah,
doing to the point where like it was like, oh, it's running in the CLI. I trust it, right? And I still always
yeah,
felt like I had to go back into a text
yeah,
editor.
yeah,
Yeah, I think the thing that has shifted, in this year in 2026 is one, the models have gotten better where I do trust them. So even if they're in the CLI, I still generally trust them. But two, I think bringing it into this app surface, I think has shown that you can enable so much more by just having that shape of product, right? By having that medium of interaction. And so I think that is, to me, that is kind of the future, right? And if anything, I actually think um, we go from here's an app that lives on your computer to just it is the computer, right? I think
mm,
that's, to me, that's probably the next era, or maybe there's some intermediary ones, but like that is the direction that I would think about things heading. Where, it's not like, oh, right, today you have the Codex app, and the Codex app can go do things in other apps, right? But
yeah,
um, can you imagine what it would be like if it was just your like Codex was the computer, right? Or like Mac OS
mm.
was the AI, right? Like there's some hybrid here where the operating system itself is doing stuff on your behalf, and it's not one app talking to other apps.
Yeah, yeah. I think we are seeing some kind of a glimpse of this. I look at X and many people doing experiments with the integrated browser instead of Codex, where it's kind of the paradigm is flipping around because for a long time we have thought about integrating the AI agents inside the existing browsers, right, inside Chrome, and instead now we are also watching people using the browser inside the AI agent app, which is the other way around. And it's more native, and the agent has access to what you're doing at all times. So is that what you mean? Part of what you mean when you say it's like the whole computer, and the Chrome, the window is the agent itself.
Yeah, I love that example because it really illustrates this pattern. I think we're going to continue seeing where
Yeah,
um, the metaphor that I love here. I don't know if you were around for like the first wave of smartphones in Silicon Valley. Not the first wave, the first like iPhone in Silicon Valley, right?
okay, yeah,
All once it was clear that smartphones were going to become a thing, all of these companies were like, okay, what is our mobile strategy, right? And the
yeah,
first thing that they did was they made m.google.com, right? m.facebook.com, and they took their
yeah,
like landscape website and they just like crammed it into this vertical form factor, right? And it
yeah,
took us the better part of a decade to figure out like what is a native product experience on a smartphone that is it's Uber, right? It's like it's DoorDash. It's these things that like you literally couldn't exist on a desktop, that you
yeah,
can now make a reality on your phone. Uh, and I think we are in the middle of that same transition with AI. And I think the m dot google.com of AI was slash is take this product and like cram a chat box on the
yeah,
sidebar, right? And then like
yeah,
chat with it on the side while you're doing stuff in the app. Um, I think that's true of like the AI browsers, right? I think like so many SaaS products that are trying to add AI are like, great, let's just like put a ChatGPT type sidebar and like let it
yeah,
do stuff in the app. Um,
yeah,
and we're gonna figure out what those native patterns are. I think we're still inventing them, but one that I'm seeing here is yes, instead of taking a browser and like sprinkling on AI on the side,
yeah,
figure out how to build an agent and more importantly, figure out how to build a browser that the agent can really leverage, right?
Yeah.
And make it the portal, the agent's portal to like the broader internet.
Yeah, and I mean, one part of this trend to me is kind of this concurrent race. It seems to me that on one side we are trying to adapt the web to make it more agent friendly, right? I mean, present displaying information in a way that agents have an easier time parsing things out, and so we adapt the web to the agents. But on the other hand, we are also seeing that agents are adapting fast, and I've been blown away by the latest iterations on computer use and how just quickly the agents can it's the silly things, right? How quickly they can move the mouse, literally, compared to, I mean, it's very close to a person doing things, and so there is a part of me that thinks maybe we should not adopt so many things, because after all, the web apps as we know them today already kind of work with agents, or maybe they will in just a few months.
I think we'll probably have both. Yeah, I've thought about this question a lot, right? Do you bet on like companies building tools for agents faster than agents get good at using tools for
Yeah,
humans, right?
yeah,
And I think in the long run you have, or in the medium term, you have both, right? Because um, there are probably some tools that like will never be in a reasonable time frame, like will never be remade for agents, right?
yeah,
You're based in Europe, so like you probably don't have this problem. For my fellow Americans like watching or listening, the banking system, right, in the
yeah,
US has like only in the last couple of years started having actual APIs that
yeah.
software companies can use. And most of the software companies that say, "Oh, connect your bank account," behind the scenes they're using Playwright to like scrape, to log in as you and like scrape your account details, right? And like that's to me that's like, yeah, okay, cool. Like if they're not building APIs for humans, like we're never going to get banks to like build APIs for agents, right? Like they're never going to have like a Bank of America CLI so your agent can go do stuff. Um, and so I think like you probably do have to like meet in the middle on a lot of things, and I suspect we'll see both patterns play out for a long time.
Yeah, and I mean, you see this all the time, even when there was, the first wave of OpenClaw and these more autonomous agents. You would see a lot of people just ignoring like APIs and MCPs and going straight telling agents sign up for this email account, and now you have an email and you just browse the web as a person. We ignore the MCPs are dead, all this kind of talk. So do you think that the current wave of AI infrastructure, including MCPs and all the affordances that we are creating, are kind of temporary, or the abstractions are solid, they're here to stay? I mean, it's a very hard question, but what's your latest take on all this landscape?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I don't like, if you're listening, please don't make any bets based on what I think. I like full, full transparency. I think I saw MCP come out and I was like, this is cool, but I don't think I appreciated how big of a thing it was going to become, right?
Okay.
And so like I don't know that I'm the best predictor of this. I will say I think, when I think about the infrastructure today, it does still feel like there's something missing a little bit, right? And
Mm,
I think in the way that um, like it is better than what it was 2 years ago, certainly, right?
of course.
I remember when RAG. I'm old enough to remember when RAG was like,
Yeah,
here's
the
how you do
hottest
RAG, and
thing in
yeah,
the
you gotta
world.
you gotta like get a vector DB, and you gotta think through your chunking strategy, and oh, you're not doing hybrid search, you gotta do both. Uh, and that's like people still do RAG, and RAG still like has a role to play, but I think it got folded into this like, no, like it turns
Mm,
out information retrieval is like a discipline that has existed for a long time and it's still useful, and like we're still learning how to do it, but it's not this silver bullet, right? And so
yeah.
I think I'm in a similar mindset around a lot of the current primitives that we have, where like they're great. I think they will turn out to probably be subsets of some larger paradigm, right? And we're seeing some of the sharp corners. I think like with with MCPs, I think like they were a really interesting, useful abstraction. But we're also discovering that it's like, oh, it turns out you can't just connect 100 MCPs to your model because you will just blow up your context window,
Yeah.
right? And like you need to figure out a better context management strategy. Maybe that means we move to a world where like the model can progressively discover tools, right? And so it's not
Yeah.
blowing. Or maybe we move to a world where the model can like dispatch a sub agent to like say, hey, go look through all of the content, like look through all of these MCP descriptions and come back and tell me the right one to use, and don't pollute my context window, right? Those are like two very different paths that you could
Yeah.
imagine. Um, Same thing with skills, right? I think skills are like this incredible way to like make essentially prompts and like scripts much more digestible and packageable. But we're also finding some sharp corners there. We're finding that um, like sharing skills is still kind of difficult, right? Especially if you are at
Yeah.
a company and have teams and have IT policies, and for like very good reasons, your IT department doesn't want you just emailing zip files of like skills to other people in the company to install
Yeah.
on their machine. Um, we also still haven't figured out like really, really good prompt injection mitigations and
Mm.
guardrails for a lot of this stuff, right? I think like for folks living on the bleeding edge, it's a lot of, in my mind, like security by obscurity right now. I'm sure people will like email me and tell me why I'm wrong, but like it's like it's the fact that like people aren't thinking about yet how to try to
Yeah.
prompt inject your open claw, right? That like I think is saving a lot of people's skin at the moment. So there's sharp corners to a lot of these primitives. I don't doubt we will figure out something better, but I think we're not there quite yet.
Yeah, that's a very sensible answer, which is disappointing. We wanted to make clips and embarrass you like 5 years from now, but I think we'll not be able to do that. But anyway, I think you mentioned something very important, like teams, the whole mess. I think that is creating skills and a lot of infrastructure at the team level. And I think one thing that I'm seeing speaking with engineer managers and people in tech teams is that many teams have like these incredibly sharp individuals that are effectively going like 10x the previous speed, but their workflows they have a hard time sharing these at the team level and turning all this infra from single player to multiplayer. um, what's your feeling about this? I mean, how do you share things inside the team? Do you think there are design patterns about creating good shared infrastructure around this?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things that we do, right? And there's I think about sharing this kind of knowledge. Take a skill for example, right? I think other types of knowledge are a little bit different. But if you take a skill, I think there's three levels at which you might want to have
Mm,
usage and like visibility, right? I think you
mm,
start with the individual, and so for skills where it's like I know I want this, but I don't think this is going to be particularly useful for my team. Um, I'll That's a personal skill. I'll keep that in my like tilde slash dot codex folder, right? And so
yeah.
like it just gets picked up automatically, and it lives there. When it comes to team stuff, what we tend to do is per repository, right, or per project.
Mm,
So within the GitHub repo for a given project, if there's skills that are going to be repeatedly useful across that project, we bake it into the repo and it lives there for people to use. And then we're I think we have some experiments that I don't think there's anything like rock solid here yet, but basically internally hosted essentially repositories, right, which have been like blessed by IT and security, and folks can like
mm.
internally upload a skill there, right? And people can go browse, and then there's a link to go like clone that skill, and then you can have it, but you can bring it back down as like a personal skill or a project-based skill.
Mm. Okay, so basically they have a similar, like same life cycle as normal code assets, right? I mean, they're version controlled. There are I imagine like some kind of owners, and there are pull requests. Maybe they get updated. They have a way to be discovered. So you treat them as regular tech assets on the team.
Yeah, I think like yeah, basically would agree with all that.
Yeah. Okay. That's the. That's very interesting. And I'm also thinking, in terms of the actual engineers that work in the team, the work on the product. Another thing that I'm hearing all the time is that roles are converging, right? There is less separation between tech layers or even design, product. They are just builders. Uh, how is it on your end? Is it true that the world now belongs to generalists, or you have specialist engineer working on specific corners of the product itself or some platform work? How is it for you?
Um, it's a good question. I think like, and I'm also, I feel like I should preemptively apologize to be like, I'm gonna give the it depends answer, right? I feel like I'm a very bad podcast interview when it comes to clipping and sharing on social media. Um, I think like I would not say the world belongs to generalists yet,
Mm,
because if you've ever been a generalist, right? If you ever worked in a team of generalists, um, the the thing that I found is not that like everybody does everything, but I think it's
yeah.
that everybody can support everything, right? But it's
Mm,
still really important to have people that spike in certain dimensions. And so even if you had a team of generalists, you would have somebody who has better design taste than the rest of the team. You would have somebody who has like better public speaking skills than the rest of the team, right? Who was better at writing like marketing copy than the rest of the team, and you would lean on those people to like leverage those strengths and in today's age amplify those strengths with AI. But you would still want a team of people where you know who to go to for specific types of work, right?
yeah.
That I think the thing that, and we're moving that direction, right? I think the thing that has changed with AI is that like if you're not on a team of generalists, you would completely silo that work, right? Your designer would only ever be doing design. And if you went to them and said, "Can you build me a prototype?" they would say, "I'm a designer. I don't do that." Right.
Yeah.
Or if you went to your marketing person and you said, like, "Hey, can you like draft some designs for this?" they would say, "I'm a marketer. I
Yeah.
don't do that." And I think the
Yeah.
thing that has really changed is we're moving towards that generalist world. But even in that world, you still want somebody, whether you call them a designer or not is a different question, but you still want somebody who's very good at design. You still want somebody who's very good
Yeah.
at marketing. Um, and now they can support each other, right? They can get much further. The designer can say, "Hey, I made a prototype. Here you go, engineer," right? Or
Yeah.
even here you go, marketer, to like add marketing copy to it, and then both of them can bring it to the engineer and say, like, "Hey, like, you know, can you figure out how to make this like just into reality?" Um,
Yeah.
and you can cross functionally support a lot more than you could
Yeah.
before.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think it's also kind of messy because, of course, it depends a lot on how personal mileage you have on all these dimensions. So I wonder if the additional, let's say, type of contribution that people can give now on the generalist, the horizontal leg of the T on the generalist side, is still, up to individual. Uh, I mean, what they're able to, or there is now some baked-in expectation about people needing to do more. I mean, you mentioned, for example, designers that now can create prototypes and in an easier way than before. But does that mean that in the team now there is an expectation that designers submit working prototypes as opposed to simply static design, or it's just up to the individual skill to go the extra mile on that? We are still at the extra mile stage, or is it already like consolidated knowledge that that's how people should work?
Um, I think with the folks that I've worked with, it's closer to consolidated knowledge, right?
Yeah.
I think and I would guess this is true of a lot of this is not true of a lot of teams, but a lot of teams want to get there, right? And
Mm,
I think for to that extent, um, yeah, I mean, this kind of goes back to your question of like, how do you get more? If you've got one person that's like way far ahead, how do
yeah.
you get the rest of the team to come along? Um, And I think for every company it's going to be a little bit different, but I think what I've been seeing that works internally is like making sure that people feel comfortable experimenting, right? I think like
Mm,
we do so much internal enablement um, at OpenAI around like they're like literally there's a team that's like, okay, we're going to teach you how to use Codex for stuff that is not coding, right? Because I think even
mm,
internally, I know this is true externally, right? Like so many people hear the term Codex and they think, oh, that's for engineers. That's not for me, right?
yeah,
And they don't appreciate so they don't even try it, and they don't appreciate how incredible it is for all types of computer-based work at this point, right?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's still generative AI, so there's still some sharp corners, but like really, if you showed this to me 2 years ago, I would have been astounded, right, at what it can do. Um, and I think that still happens even internally, right? I think there's still even people at the company who are a little bit less so now, but if you rewind like 2, 3 months ago, like who are like, oh, that's for the engineers. Like I don't know about that. Um, and so I think you have to meet people where they are, and you have to teach them and show them like even though it might look intimidating, there is still a lot of value that you can derive. And I think once you show people um, that it is useful to them. Uh, in their work, and they don't have to be like, and it is for them, right? It is not for some other
yeah.
type of person, right? I think that goes a long way.
Yeah, and I was also thinking back at what you said before about sharing skills and creating a repository and sharing understanding and discovery of this. Because I'm guessing people who are further along, a way they can help and extract, create more leverage is just bottling how they're doing stuff into skills and systems that work for others to multiplying that leverage for other people on the team.
Yeah, and a lot of times, yeah, if there's someone on your team who's in your role and it says, "Hey, here's how I'm doing this stuff," right? I think creating a culture where that's not just acceptable, but that's celebrated is so important. I know that I've talked to friends who are at companies who are like, yeah, they like I've done this with AI, but I don't ever want to tell anybody because I don't want my boss to think that I'm like cutting corners or like that I'm being lazy. And I'm like,
Yeah,
that's so crazy, right?
yeah,
Uh so I think that's the it is in large part a cultural challenge as much as
yeah.
it is a product challenge.
Yeah, I'm also hearing people who restrain from, sharing their tips and tricks because they feel like people on their team are stack ranked, on AI proficiency. And so they want to stay the AI wizard on the team. I mean, there are so many things that we can get wrong in, trying to increase the adoption of AI on the team. It's amazing how if anything goes wrong, everything goes downhill. I mean, and you get all these nasty and toxic things happening.
Yeah. Um which I if I had a great solution for that I would tell you, but I think it's you got to take it one day at a time.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned skills before, and I actually had a question that popped in my mind while you were talking before. Other than skills, where let's say that skills are instructions and rules, but the agent may or may not follow them all the time. I mean, you're not 100% sure what's happening. Do you also have like hard guardrails about things that you want to be in a certain way in the code, either, from testing coverage, code health, or documentation being enforced in some way. So you have ways to enforce the thing you really care about in a stronger way than just using skills.
Yeah. And um I think skills are really great for giving context to your agent, right, or your model.
Yeah.
Um, we still need a lot of things, and I'm talking about code specifically, right?
Hmm.
We still need a lot of things to tell the model, so that the model can figure out when it has done a good job, right?
Mm,
And I think the term for it these days is harness engineering, and I've written a
yeah.
little bit about this. You can folks can read some more about this. Um, but I these days I think about it as like you have to define the boundaries of like what is good, right? Well, first you have to know what is good. You have to define that, right? But then you have to like really give the model these boundaries of what is good so that it can fill in inside of that. And I think in practice, that means things like having a good test suite, right? And saying like, hey, like all of these tests have to pass before you can consider the job done. I think having things like good linters, right? So
Yeah.
saying like, hey, like we're gonna check to make sure, like if you've ever had a model try to write front end code, like most of the time it's good, but sometimes it really goes off the rails. And if you're a front end expert, you're reading it and you're like, what is this slop, right? Like, why did you, why did you write it this way? You should not have, taken a use effects hook here, right?
Yes.
Um, and and so I think the more that you are arguing with the model about this was wrong, fix it, to me that is a smell that you should somehow bake that into like an actual deterministic rule, not a skill, right, but a rule
Yeah.
that the model can go check. And so you should have a linter for your project that says like never put use effect like into this situation, right? And so it's not about like, oh, was the skill wording strong enough to tell the model to do it? It's more like the model should be able to check if it's done, and then the linter should tell it, hey, you put this use effect here, go fix it, right?
Yeah.
And so it can iterate on that as it goes, and then it knows once that's all green lit, it knows it's done.
Yeah. So the more you can put in a deterministic check, the better, basically.
Yeah. Um, and I
You,
think that expands too of things like so like linters are one, CI is one. Giving the model access to Playwright is another, right? Especially if
yeah.
you're doing like front end, saying, hey, use Playwright, take a screenshot and like compare it to the Figma output, right? And if they don't match, you're not done yet.
Yeah. Are there also gains to be found in like strategies that split the coding agents into multiple roles in like even an adversarial way? The I don't know, the reviewer agents that only does code reviews versus the coding agent or the orchestrator. I mean, are these things that feel a little bit, transitory and with each model need to be reevaluated, or there is like a long running, advantage in creating this kind of pipeline where you have separate roles with very clear cut instructions? And how is it for you?
I'm still figuring out I think my opinions on this because today I still find a lot of value out of having a review agent. Like even if I have it write all the code,
Mm,
I will still make sure I queue up a separate review task at the end of it. And for whatever reason, I do find that it is useful when you do it like without all the context that got you to there, right? I think
yeah,
in a lot of ways, LLMs are kind of like humans in this, where if they've been up close working on it, they have a harder time seeing the flaws in it, right?
yeah,
And so at least in this moment in time, I still find value in like having a separate review agent. But long term, I don't know. I think a lot about like code factories here. Have you familiar with this
yeah,
idea?
yeah,
For folks who might not be aware, like there's this emerging idea where you have, you know, a quote unquote factory of agents and they're just shipping code 24/7,
yeah,
and they're autonomously like there's a like you said there's a manager one, maybe there's like a product designer or like
yeah,
like a QA agent, and they're constantly just talking to each other and giving each other feedback on what goes out the door. um, and I need to use those more, I think, to get a better sense of where I think they slot in. um, Today, I think they probably articulate something that will become useful, but I
yeah.
I would imagine it will be more useful in a, like, more rigid product format, right? Rather than, um, like, this very loose, like, every agent just wears this hat and has a custom prompt and, like, does its thing.
Yeah, I'm conflicted about this too because I do a lot of AI coding for Terraria and for other things, and there are times where it feels, because I've experimented with many approaches, and there are times where it feels like, oh, it's such a waste to have different agents and roles. I mean, we don't really need this. We can just move faster. And there are other times where it feels genuinely that the, let's say, the reviewer, quote unquote, picks up things that would have not been picked up by the coding one. I mean, my kind of intuition about that is that for the reviewer, finding problems is success. Anyway, I've done my job. Instead, for the same agent that needs to ship the feature, that's kind of a failure. I mean, if it was a person, there would be kind of a conflict of interest, right? So I
Yeah.
don't know if the AI feels that, but if it were people, I would definitely see that.
Yeah. Um, I wanted to ask too, I think with Talaria, because I've done a lot of experimenting with giving agents a local knowledge base, and I would love to
Yeah,
know what kind of strategies you've found really effective in working with this stuff.
yeah. So I let me think about how to give a concise answer that doesn't go like off track. I think one thing that has been really working for me, and that is then at the very foundation of how Terraria works, is organize things in types and relationships as opposed to folders, and for various reasons. And I think it's good for even for humans and not just for AI, because one thing is that folders are very rigid as structures. You know, one node can belong to only one folder, basically. And so I was finding myself all the time figuring out if, I don't know, the one meeting node had to go in the meeting notes folder or in the project folder that we were discussing, right? And instead, if you treat things more like a graph with weak links and relationships, it's like you can have your cake and eat it too. In
Hmm.
a way. And I feel that maybe folders are more understandable for people because it's a clear navigation, but agents can now grab just the heck out of everything. And so they can just, search for how many nodes of this type do exist, and let me navigate this and that and follow the connections and the wiki links very, very easily. So that's one of the main things that led me to try to design a tool that works a little bit differently from, I don't know, Obsidian or others that are great, but are more like folder centric, and don't have like relationships and types as first class citizens. That's one thing. And then there are many others, but I think we could stay like hours just in this.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. I use Obsidian at work mostly because they
Yeah.
don't let us download Talaria. I should probably ask them. But um, I find that I think with any kind of knowledge base, it's been really incredible pairing it with the Codex desktop app,
Yes.
because it can do a lot of things. It has automations now, right? And so you can set up a
Yes.
recurring automation
Yeah.
to do stuff. So one of my favorite ones is um, I have it check Slack like, every few hours, and it will just collect in the background like all of this Slack context. For reference, like I still join like 3 to 5 new Slack channels like almost every day at work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it is just like an unimaginable amount of just like stuff. You have to, at OpenAI, you have to kind of learn how to like deal with the amount of Slack stuff being thrown at you. Otherwise, you kind of get just lost in it. Um, but Codex has really helped because I can just have it check every few hours, like, here's all the new stuff coming in from Slack. Go update these project files that are relevant to
Yeah.
me, right? Go update these people files of people that I'm working with. Keep
Yeah.
track of like all of the open items that might be on my plate, right? I have just like a daily note that's like, here's everything. And just Codex is constantly updating it of like, here's
Yeah.
everything coming in. And it's not going to be like 100% accurate, but I think the point is
Yeah.
that it doesn't need to be. It needs to be accurate enough to be a safety net, right? And on the really hectic days, like I guarantee there are things in there where I would have probably dropped it or forgotten about it if Codex had not put it in that note for me to be like, oh, I
Yeah.
forgot I told somebody I would send them this link, right? And like
Yeah.
I have a reference there.
Yeah, it feels to me that it comes a moment where you pass some kind of magical threshold in which kind of the knowledge base has enough information, enough structure, around projects, people, meetings, procedures, responsibilities, then that you see agents filling out things correctly and even in a way that is richer and better than what humans would do, but not because they are smarter, but because I think for us it's a pain just to write docs and the likes, right? And instead, they create a note for a meeting, connect it to the right people, and then you click on the people page on that person page, and you have all the latest notes that related to them, and it's a compounding thing. And it's true. I mean, I've been using Codex automations a lot. Paired, and I mean sometimes replacing some of my OpenClaw ones, because I found them a little bit more reliable in some cases. But I still also use OpenClaw a lot because of mobile, and I send voice notes on Telegram, and so it's. But yeah, it's wild, very fascinating.
Would love to know if the Codex mobile
Yeah.
feature that just shipped yesterday solved some of that for you, and would love any feedback you have on that when you get to using it.
I've seen the release note, but still haven't tried it. We'll
Yeah,
let you
no,
know.
totally understand. There's a million things in this industry
Yeah,
shipping every day, and like it
yeah,
is a full-time job just to test everything that like comes out every week, right?
exactly. Constantly behind. And I mean, and speaking of things that have been released recently, one of the things I wanted to ask is that you have also recently released the new image model that has been praised a lot, right? And I've seen people using it also for design, UI, application design, and made me think that this is still a space where it feels like we're a little bit behind with respect to where we are with coding, right? I mean, at least there is no strong consensus on what a good AI workflow is in terms of the design thing. What's your do you have any advice for us who want also to design things with AI, not just to code things?
Yeah. I love the new image model that just
Yeah,
came out, GPT Image 2. Which is funny because I think if you had asked me a couple of months ago, hey, like, do you think like we need to make better AI image models, right? I probably would have been like, no, like they're pretty good, right? Like, but excuse me, but I think there is this like qualitative difference that we still, and I think this is true across AI, right? Where if you make it smarter and if you make it better, it will unlock things that you didn't think about ahead of
yeah,
time, right? And
yeah,
I think like um, now there's like really cool stuff that I am doing with this image model. When it comes to coding specifically, I have this workflow that like when I say it out loud sounds a little bit insane, but like actually feels like really useful. Um, and it's that I design with the image model first. I treat the image model as my designer, and then I hand it over to the coding model or the text model as my engineer, right?
yeah,
And we have heard the feedback loud and clear. Like the GPT series is not is not the best at front end, right? Like the community has made that feedback very clear. Um, we're working on it, but I think a workflow that I've loved is iterating first with the image model because it's actually faster and cheaper to do that, right? Than to like go back and forth and argue about like, hey, like, this button should have been here and that one should have been there, right?
yeah,
Like it's much faster to say just generate a new image, right? And like
yeah,
let's look at it and I'll give you feedback. I can even like take my, use my mouse and just like draw on it and like send it back. Um, and then once I feel really good about it, it doesn't have to be pixel perfect, right? But like once I feel like, hey, this is like 90% of what I want, um, then I can give it to the main model and say, like, go build this, right? And like build
okay,
it like with the same conventions we already have in this repository, with the same primitives,
yeah,
we're already using the same components. Um, and it does, in my experience, it does like a much better job than if I'm vibe coding a new thing and I try to describe from scratch what I want, even if I'm using something like plan mode does better, but I still find even
mm,
with plan mode, there's a lot that like I am imagining that is not being captured in the prompt. Right.
yeah, okay,
And when I have, it's still a picture's worth 1,000 words, right?
yeah,
And when I have that image, I can give it to it. And I find I'm using this for more than just like web apps. Actually, we've been doing a lot of experimentation with motion graphics and using
mm,
like Codex to build these like animated, launch videos. And because I'm not a designer, I lack the language to describe,
Yeah,
in detail what it is I want, but I can go back and forth with the image model really easily
yeah,
to prototype.
yeah. And you find that you need to supply, a design system or some reference or, some more structured guidance about how you want things to look like, or is it in many cases enough that the model just look at what the app looks like right now and it can build incrementally on that?
In a lot of cases, it can build incrementally on that, right? And I think like um, the again, going back to like Codex as a product, right? Once you give the agent all these tools, I can say like, hey, go imagine this feature, right?
Yeah,
And or I can say like, here's a PRD, go like visualize it for me, right? And it can say, okay, I can go and like boot the app. I can like screenshot existing pages, so I have a reference image, and then I can use the image generation. I can even feed in the screenshots that I have to the image model and have it like make changes to them, right? Or edit them or remix
yeah.
them. And so you can start to combine all these things together to like really make something powerful.
Yeah, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I will experiment more with that because I've tried a few things, but not a lot. Now you have given me motivation. And
I feel like the for me personally, it's like, if I was a Figma power user, I probably would be like, well, I don't need that, right? I think because I'm not a Figma power user, it feels
yeah,
like a real capability unlock for me personally.
yeah. I mean, and I think that the point is how far you can go with that, even without having and building a proper giant Figma file, and because I think there. But for a long time, even before these models, has felt like if you use like a quite strict component model on the front end, things like Shadcn UI, and many people had the temptation to skip, the design stage and just, design the browser, quote unquote. And probably this is another piece of the puzzle that makes it easier to work that way, and basically kind of skipping the whole proper design function with the giant Figma file, which I'm not saying this is better or worse. It's just, probably better fit for some simple use cases, and you will still need Figma for others, but it's very interesting.
Yeah, and then certainly like within OpenAI, we still use Figma. Like that's not going
Yeah.
anywhere, right?
With
I think me
saying
as an
hi to
individual,
Figma. Yeah.
yeah, I think like me as an individual though, like you're saying, I get to experiment much faster, even though I'm not like an expert in these design tools.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Makes a lot of sense. And also, speaking of your personal usage, how do you decide between different intelligence and amount of thinking? Do you do that based on your task, or you have just a go-to mode? You always do that. That's what I do, for example. How is it?
Yeah. I think at work, my go-to is thinking or reasoning high.
Mm,
I think that's extra. I try to tell people this as much as I can. You do not need to be on extra high like as a default, and arguably you should not be on. You're probably just wasting like tokens, right? Um, and like extra high is great where it's like this is genuinely a thing that it needs to think really hard about. Extra high doesn't mean like work harder, right? It means like you know, if you gave this to a human and a human was like, this is really tricky, I have to sit down and think about this before I understand what I need to do. Um, that is when you should use extra high, right? And so for most stuff, like the lower reasoning levels will be faster. They will save you
yeah.
more tokens, right? And I think medium is like a great default. I do high mostly because I don't worry about usage limits at work, right?
Yeah.
And so like that's why that's my default.
Yeah, and speaking of usage limits, I have a final question about controversies around this, because I mean, there are many engineers who are worried and concerned that limits might change. These plans are super subsidized, and of course, there's been also recent controversy with Claude limiting programmatic usage. And I'm not asking you to comment on that, of course, but can we be comfortable that these plans are here to stay, or they're just meant to lure us in, and they should be costing like 10x what they're costing? What can you tell us?
Sure. I mean, I can tell you like nobody on the Codex team that I have talked to is of the mindset of like, yeah, we need to like lure them in so that we, we can, because I think we all like, OpenAI had to come from behind in the coding space, right? And so like I think like we understand very deeply that developers are going to choose the best product, right? And
Yeah.
there's not a way to like trick people into like locking them in. They're gonna switch if you don't have a good product, and so we want to compete on that. I think OpenAI has like been very strategic about securing a lot of compute, and that like gives us this advantage. Long term, I don't know. I think like there is this very weird thing in Silicon Valley right now where we have come from a place where marginal software is effectively free to run, right? The cost of
Yeah.
running, if I build a SaaS app, right, and I add
Yeah.
an extra user, it costs me effectively $0 to add that extra user, right? That
Yeah.
has not been true with generative AI to this point. And so a lot of our assumptions around business models as an industry, I think, are breaking when it comes to like how do you charge people for AI. So like the flat subscription based model, people love it, and I know like we would love to support it. I cannot like foresee the future though because the economics are just different here. Um,
Yeah.
I will say I think with Codex though and with models in general, the other thing that I think is really interesting here is that like uh, there has been an expectation, I think, from everybody, and I think the companies themselves have helped set this expectation. But there's been an expectation of like we will keep increasing the intelligence of models, and like they will stay at the same price or cheaper,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Even again going back to like the economics question, even when we know that like they are more expensive to run, right? Like a
Yeah.
bigger model with if you 10x the number of parameters in the model, you cannot run it at the same
Yeah.
cost as like the smaller one, right? You like literally you just cannot, right?
Yeah.
And
But we
so
expect it to cost the same. It's like
we
the new
expect it to cost
iPhone.
the same.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so like I think as an industry we're gonna have to reckon with that at some point. But I think like it trains us to always, yeah, like the iPhone, right? You don't expect to like if Apple said we're gonna like our iPhone got 10 times more expensive, we have to charge you more. I think people would understand that a little bit easier, but we're so used to software just like being the
Yeah.
same price, that like I don't know what's gonna happen in the future, but I do know that like the cost of the intelligence you get today, I think
Yeah.
will continue to decrease, right? And so,
Mm.
if the models are great at things you can do today, like I think a lot of individuals maybe um, don't reach for like a smaller model more often because there's the
Yeah.
assumption I have to be on the biggest and greatest. Um,
Yes.
I think I see it in practice a lot of enterprises will because they're much more cost conscious and they'll say like we can get away with doing this thing with a mini model, right?
Yeah.
And so like we're gonna use the mini model and like therefore save tokens and save cost. Um, and I wonder how that plays out with individuals over time, where it's like actually like 5.5, in hindsight, 5.5 was great for all these coding tasks, and I
Yeah.
didn't need to upgrade to 5.6 or 5.7 or whatever comes after, right?
Yeah, and actually, I mean, I was one of those. I mean, I thought that 5.4 was great, and I thought, okay, maybe this is generally the first model that I've been thinking. I don't really care that a better model comes out for coding, and instead now, of course, I'm all in 5.5. I mean, so I think this also comes from us having a kind of poor understanding of what's the difference between different models. It's like what you said before, you don't need thinking extra high all the time, but many of us don't know really well what how to choose or what changes, and so if you when in doubt, just put extra high there. Like, and maybe not only you didn't need extra high, maybe you didn't need 5.5, you could go with the Spark model, right? And I think there is something that we should improve into how we understand what are the differences in capabilities of these models that could unlock a lot of savings, but even not just money, even latency, making things faster. But it feels it's still kind of messy.
Yeah, I think we absolutely need better, legibility, and that's part of my job on developer experience, right? Is like improving the legibility around like how should you be using these tools,
Yeah.
because like again they're non-deterministic, so everyone's experience is different, right? And I can come out here and say like, hey, medium is great, high is great, and I'm sure I will like meet people who are like, no, like these have been a terrible experience for me, like for the work that I do,
Yeah.
for the like setup that I have, like I need extra high. And I think we're all kind of figuring this out. Even me, I'm figuring this out every day, right? And I'm trying
Yeah.
to like teach people as much as I can, as best as I can.
Yeah. So we will keep figuring this out. And thank you so much, Charlie, for joining this chat. It's been great. Thank you again for coming on the show.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, Luca.
Thank you so much for listening. If you found this chat valuable, you can subscribe to the show on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Also, please consider giving us a rating or leaving a review, as that really helps other listeners find the show. You can find all past episodes and learn more about the show at refactoring.fm. See you in the next episode.